I'm Esther. I live in the Rhondda Valley in South Wales. I've lived here most of my life. I'm a single mum. I've got 3 sons. Only one of them still lives with me now. He's nearly 14. The other 2 are grown up now and off living their own adventures. And yeah, so it's just me and him and the dog.
Lovely. Okay. Let's dive into the drinking story then, shall we? When did it all start? Were you a teenage drinker like me?
Yeah. I started drinking for fun, and it legitimately was for fun when I was 16. I think I would go out and 3 halves of cider and black was my maximum, and that would get me nicely tipsy. And then when I was 19, I discovered getting drunk was an interesting way to have fun. I met a lot of people who I hadn't known in school who went to a different school, and it gave me a chance to be a new person. And they were into partying, so I joined them very enthusiastically in that, discovered drugs as well, started drinking pint, which meant that my consumption went up quite a lot. And then when I was 20, I made a pretty terrible decision that had some really terrible repercussions on my life and my mental health. My mental health was shot by this point. And I discovered that if I drank enough, I could disappear. And I began then drinking as oblivion seeking rather than fun seeking. And that became how I got through life. I remember the time I decided to drink on my own as a replacement for friends, which was a pretty big moment. I was a single mum. I was doing a degree and I was lonely. I was in university surrounded by all these 18-year-olds who were out having fun every night, and I was going home and watching Thomas the Tank Engine. And I was very lonely and I was missing my friends. And yeah, I started drinking as a way of easing loneliness. I knew my drinking was problematic at that point, but that was the line I was never going to cross. And I remember the moment I crossed it.
We all have our rules, don't we?
Yeah. That was the first of many rules that I broke countless times. But yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Somebody once said, if you need to make rules about your drinking, you probably shouldn't be drinking. And
I agree.
That was after I stopped drinking that somebody said that to me when we were talking about the rules that we create. And it's so true, isn't it? If you have to
because people that don't have a problem, they would never dream of making rules. It's only us.
Yeah.
So that was in your 20s drinking because you were a bit lonely. And how did it evolve into your 30s?
When I was in my 30s, I was back in the Rhondda, and I moved back here after my degree. My son had spent a few months living with my parents when I was doing my final teaching practice because I just couldn't manage the logistics of it all. And he was in school here. He was starting to get settled here. And I went out for a night with some old friends, some of the previous party friends that I'd hung out with. And after 4 years of feeling really lonely in Swansea, it was just wonderful to reconnect with all these friends. I wasn't lonely anymore. But those friends were still drinking and taking drugs. So then I was surrounded by people. So I didn't have the loneliness so much anymore, but I was in this social world that made excessive drinking look completely normal. And obviously I was a single mum, so I was still having a lot of the lonely moments as well. So I was drinking with my friends, but I was also continuing to drink alone. It got worse because the people that I was hanging out with, they could all probably look at their drinking and ask themselves some questions if they were to choose to. So I was drinking a lot more and drinking a lot more on my own then as well. I could justify it with they're drinking tonight. I know they're drinking tonight, so I can drink tonight. Yeah, it got a lot worse. My drinking got a lot worse.
Did you come to a moment, a rock bottom, when you thought, I can't do this anymore?
My rock bottom was not so much about my drinking, but about my mental health in general. When I was, I was 40. It was one of the worst years of my life, where it seemed like life was determined to get some messages home from the start of the year right the way through to the end. It seemed like everything was going wrong. I had loads of things going on, family, work, relationship issues. And I ended up having a breakdown. And I had this kind of light bulb moment where I was listening to a song that I'd been completely obsessed with for a few weeks. It's a song called "I Appear Missing" by Queens of the Stone Age. This song is all about feeling completely lost in your own life and like you're lost from everyone, particularly from yourself. And I had been addicted to this song. It was like a physical craving sometimes. I have to listen to it. I have to listen to it. And I was sitting outside my house smoking because I never smoked in the house. I was just sitting on the doorstep of my house with a glass of wine, smoking, just having quite a nice evening really in the terrible year, but it was a reasonably pleasant time. And I just had this insight that this song was written for me. That it suddenly hit me really hard that like I was completely lost. And as a result of that insight, I didn't sleep until about 3:00 in the morning. I turned up late for work, missing a really important meeting. So then I was on a disciplinary in my first 6 months of my job. So I knew I was going to get sacked. And then I just all fell apart. It was like, I knew that this collapse was coming. Okay, just let it come. I surrender. A few weeks later, I gave up that job before they could fire me. I just let the breakdown come and I spiraled. I spent days painting my kitchen and then decided we needed to move house and we moved to a ridiculous location. I just did a lot of really crazy things. Then I decided that the best thing to do when you're in the middle of a breakdown is to go and train as a yoga teacher. And so I signed up to be a yoga teacher, to train to be a yoga teacher.
Okay.
But that actually saved me. It was a crazy decision. What I needed to do was go to a doctor and get some proper mental health support. But training to be a yoga teacher is actually what saved me. So my rock bottom moment came in the summer. And the salvation came out of that. But it was going to be 1.5 years before I stopped drinking.
Yeah, I can believe that. I do yoga. It does ground you because we lose ourselves when we drink too much, don't we? And that song was coming through to you loud and clear. It was a message and you listened to the message and then subconsciously you chose yoga. And I imagine that played quite a big role in your recovery.
I was doing yoga a lot at that point anyway. I was going to a lot of yoga classes. I was really into yoga. It was giving me something, but there was something missing from what I was getting from it because I was still needing the numbing. What I gained in the yoga teacher training was I learned how to breathe properly. And I think that was a massive thing because that gave me an internal mechanism to regulate my emotion. We had to do a lot of reflection, a lot of writing, and I was supposed to keep a diary. And I'm very ADHD and I can't do things like keep diary. I can't do it. I can try. I've got thousands of notebooks that have had good intentions all over them and it never works. But what we also had to do was write essays. And these essays became my diary, really. I did all my reflections in these essays. I look back at some of them now and it's just like this stream of consciousness as I was just pouring out everything that was in my head was going into these essays. I did a lot of breathing and I did a lot of therapy through this writing. Halfway through the course, I stopped drinking during the week so that I could get up and do my morning practice. And then at the weekend, Friday and Saturday night were my drinking nights apart from course weekends. So my tolerance was dropping because I wasn't drinking every night. And so then the hangovers would get worse because I was doing all this sort of cleansing and all this good stuff as well. And then on the 12th of October of that year, I woke up with the worst hangover I have ever had in my entire life. And I just wanted to die because I couldn't do any of the things I wanted to do. I could barely open my eyes. Agony. And now I'm saying that was a rock bottom moment as well, but I've never thought about it as such because that was actually the moment that I just thought, no, this is ridiculous. It didn't feel like a rock bottom moment. It just felt like a really stupid moment. when I was lying there thinking, I wanted to do this and this and this and this, and I can't do any of them. I didn't need to get drunk last night. Why did I do that? I didn't need to drink all that. I was up until 5 o'clock in the morning drinking everything. Then I decided I'm not going to do this to myself anymore because I don't need to, because I was becoming aware of the fact that my drinking was less about the alcohol and more about that needing to numb and needing to hide from what was going on. But I was healing all that and I was facing all that. I didn't say I'm not going to drink anymore because I had enough insight into myself by then to know that was the best way to get me to the off license was to tell myself I wasn't going to do it anymore. So I just told myself I'm going to stay sober. And I didn't focus on not drinking. I focused on staying sober. I focused on how good going to bed each night felt without being drunk and how good waking up in the morning felt. And I really hammered home the benefits of sobriety. And I did that for a few weeks with no intention of never drinking again. That wasn't on the table at all. It wasn't I'm not drinking anymore at any point until my brother's wedding, which was, I think it's the 20th of November. And I chose not to drink. They had really good wine and they had waiters. You just had to put your hand up and your drink would be filled. And I could have got really drunk and I would have got really drunk. And I didn't. And I had such a beautiful time. I was able to look after my son. We ended up having to walk for about a mile at the end of the night because we decided to walk because it was a nice evening. And I was able to do that. I was able to care for my son even that late at night. I woke up in the morning. I could remember everything. I didn't have to worry about facing my parents because I'd done something really stupid. I tried to snog one of the waiters or something. And I just had these beautiful memories. And I just thought that was an amazing time, an amazing way to be at something where I knew I would have got completely hammered within 2 hours of that wedding. And when we were going home in the car, and I didn't have my mum making snarky comments about my wine breath and, oh, you smell of cigarettes, you're still drunk, and all of these comments that I would have had. I just said, I really enjoyed last night. I don't think I want to drink anymore. And that was it. I knew at that point that it wasn't about not wanting to drink. I really enjoyed being sober. And it was just incredible because I spent 20 years thinking that was the worst way to live.
That's so beautiful. Most of us, when we decide to quit, we're pushed into it, aren't we? We see it as a punishment. But you were pulled towards it by the benefits. And in fact, those of us that have been sober for a while, we understand that sobriety gives us so much more than it takes away, and that the benefits are amazing and the benefits are worth those first few difficult months. And I love the way that those tools of writing and breathing, you found them instinctively.
Yes.
I think yours is such an interesting story, and it's quite different because I think most of us are pushed into sobriety because our life's going pear-shaped and the health and everything. So we grit our teeth and do our best, and gradually we get into it and then we experience those benefits. But you were clever. You found the benefits. I love that.
Yeah.
So well done.
It's always been really interesting for me coming into the sober recovery world with this very different perspective on it. I should have done it years ago. I definitely needed to stop drinking a long time before I did. But had I done it at any other time, I would have been there white knuckling it with everyone else. But I did it the other way around. But I did the healing and that personal growth bit because I realized that it was not about the drinking. When it was about trying to hold myself back from drinking, it never, ever worked because all I felt was I was depriving myself. And it was like you said, punishment.
I interviewed a guy the other day who teaches meditation. He's a Brit. He was a very heavy drinker. He discovered meditation and he was fascinated by it. And he went to a retreat and he developed his own meditation practice. He hadn't been trying to stop drinking at all, although he knew he had a serious problem. But somehow he found himself drinking less and less because subconsciously he was thinking, I'm doing all this work and I'm getting so much out of meditation. My drinking isn't really congruent with my lifestyle anymore. And
Yes.
it just gradually tapered
Yeah.
off. I think that's so interesting. And
Mm.
now he actually teaches people, apart from meditation, he also teaches them how to quit drinking. And he starts them off by just says, forget about the drinking. Let's just learn to meditate. So in
Yeah.
a way, you did that, didn't you?
I think most people who develop problem drinking, it's about hiding from something, isn't it? There's
Yeah.
something in here that we can't or don't want to face because it's too painful. It makes us feel bad. Whatever it is, there's something. And I know that's what I was doing. Obviously, meditation is part of yoga. It gives you tools to actually be able to look at what's going on in your head and to be with that rather than running away from it.
Yeah.
I got to that point where I didn't need to do it anymore because I knew that I was trying to hide from my emotions with drinking, and I wasn't trying to hide from my emotions anymore.
We say at Tribe Sober that we have to learn to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. So when we have that emotion we don't like, then sit with it because it will move on. Whereas when we're drinkers, of course, we numb it away, don't we?
And you learn and you grow from things when you sit with them, and you heal from things a lot quicker. Yeah. My mum died in 2022, and I know that if I'd been drinking when my mum had got sick, I would have made her last year of life infinitely worse. I would have made my experience of it and my family's experience of it infinitely worse. And it would have taken me such a long time to heal. I remember saying to my mum a couple of years before she got sick, and my brother died in 2005, and we were talking about that. And I said, I genuinely don't think I actually started to heal from Richard's death until I stopped drinking 9 years later, because it was only then that I could actually really process and really be there with the fact that he was gone. It took me such a long time to get even to a place where I could talk about him without crying.
Yeah.
Because every time I did, I would just drink. I was never dealing with how I felt about it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's lovely that you were there for your mum's last year, because I'm sure you had a very deep connection that you never would have had otherwise. I read somewhere, Esther, that you hate the idea of us being powerless against alcohol. And I certainly have an issue with that, because I went to AA when I first tried to get sober. And I hated being labeled an alcoholic, because that was the first thing I hated. And then when they told me I was powerless, I couldn't believe that. I was, what are you telling me I'm powerless? What's your take on being powerless?
I never went to AA. I went to one AA meeting that was at a conference I was at, and I went out of curiosity to see what it was like. And I never felt the urge to go back to another one. But I remember this moment when I was in my yoga teacher training. It was just before I stopped drinking. But it was at the time I was very aware that I really needed to do something about it. And I wasn't quite sure what or how at that point. At the time, I was still thinking that it was going to have to be some sort of AA thing, that I had the understanding, but I needed to go and do some sort of program. And my teacher said something, and I remember having this thought of, and he was, that's it. I've got the power to do this. Nobody else can do this. I can do this. It's my life. And if I want my life to be better, there's no one else is going to do this, but I can. That was not long before that moment when I decided to start living sober. That moment of feeling like I can do this very much informed how I felt that morning when I was lying there, or probably afternoon, because I'd been up till 5 o'clock in the morning. It was probably the afternoon I was lying on my sofa thinking I can do better for myself than this. I can do more with my life than drink like this every Saturday night. So I went into my recovery journey feeling like I was doing it. I had that power. It was coming from me, coming from inside me. I knew that yoga was important. I knew that walking was important. And I did have this little bit of time of thinking, maybe if I stop doing yoga, maybe I'm in trouble. But I stopped doing yoga and I wasn't in trouble. I was fine. So very much being aware that my recovery came from me and choices I was making and tools that I had within myself, self-care practices and the resolve that I developed. And then last year, I think it was, I read a book by an American doctor called Lance Dodds. He works in addiction and he talks about addiction and that moment when you reach for the bottle or you reach for the drug or you go to the shop and you buy the thing you don't need just because you want that rush. He talks about that as being a moment of powerlessness, that we do that when we feel lack of power in our lives. So to tell somebody that is acting out of powerlessness and that the actual addiction is powerless, that they are powerless to do anything about that, it just feels so counterproductive because actually making that decision to even say, I need help, that in itself is a powerful bloody thing to do.
Absolutely.
That takes much strength. How dare someone tell someone that they're powerless when they're saying, I have a problem? No, they're not. You're not powerless. Whether you look to a higher power or you follow a program, that doesn't matter. Whatever way of doing it works for you and that's wonderful, but you're not powerless. Nobody's powerless.
I absolutely agree. We're all sober warriors. And because we've got that power within us, nobody can take it away, really.
Exactly.
We say to people, put down your glass and take back your power.
Love it.
So sobriety is a superpower as well, I believe, because once we get sober, we think, wow, I did that hard thing. What else can I do?
Yeah, absolutely. And when you get through the things that you know would have previously sent you to the pub or gone and bought a bucket of fags and a bottle of wine, I've got through things that I know would have sent me into weeks and weeks of binging and really beating myself physically and emotionally. And I've come through them all. And I felt every bit of pain and I felt every bit of anxiety and unhappiness and all of it. And I got through it. I remember walking home from a family court meeting a few years back, a horrible breakup with my youngest son's father. It was a horrible court meeting and I'd been at my mum's for a cup of tea afterwards to calm me down because I was quite agitated. And then I decided to walk home rather than have a lift because I needed to walk off some stress. I was walking back and I was like going over all this in my head. And suddenly I just shouted at the top, oh my God, I'm a beeping warrior. And I was just like, yes. And under different circumstances, I would have stopped at my friend's house with a bottle of wine in my hand after that day. And I walked all the way home with nothing more than a cup of tea. And I felt so strong.
Yeah.
It was,
And I'm sure a lot of personal growth has come from those difficult moments that you
absolutely.
Faced. So 9 years sober, congratulations. I'm 9 years in May, so we're sober twins.
Yeah.
And I absolutely share your view that sobriety is a gift. I wondered if you'd like to talk about the benefits of sobriety that you've experienced in 9 years.
This was the question that nearly got me crying the other day because I was going to talk about how I'm still alive, which I think is quite miraculous in itself. My youngest son doesn't have any recollection of seeing me drink because he was 4 when I stopped drinking. He finds it quite surreal to imagine that I used to drink and smoke and be drunk. And I love that. I just love that because my other 2 children very much knew. So then I get to enjoy things. I'm a bit of a rocker. And so I love going to see live music and going to festivals. And I get to experience those completely in the moment. I dance better. I don't have to keep dashing off to the bar or to the toilet because I've drunk so much. And I get to experience all that. So I get to live in the moment a lot more. I'm a lot kinder, a much nicer friend, I think, than I used to be. I'm nicer to myself, which is also quite good. And I discovered I have ADHD, which was quite handy because I don't think I would have worked that out if I'd carried on drinking because I was basically self-medicating for 20 years. My mum, where I was able to be present with her. And now in the aftermath of her death, I'm able to continue to be there for my dad. And I'm healing properly. And I've sat with all the grief and all the pain and all the memories and the joy. And there's been so many beautiful memories that I've thought about as a result of her dying that I had forgotten about. And I've sat with all of that, and it's painful, but it's beautiful as well. Yeah. And I think there is something really profoundly beautiful about being in such intense pain, emotional pain, and being with it. Yeah. And just honoring it, because it's a gift. To grieve for somebody is a gift, because it means that you loved them and that there was a relationship worth grieving for that.
Yeah, that's beautiful, beautiful benefits. Thank you. Talk to us about coaching then. When did you decide to have a go at coaching?
I started looking at addiction counseling. That's a 3-year degree at minimum. So then I thought coaching then. So I started looking into coaching and realized that coaching was actually the element that had been missing from what I'd been trying to do. So I was very lucky that I got put in touch with a charity called ADS, a Manchester charity, who was looking to recruit people to be volunteers to train as recovery coaches. So they funded me to train with the Recovery Coach Academy. So I trained as a recovery coach. I also wanted to be able to bring in more of the yoga related, not yoga specifically, but that body mind connection, because I knew that was fundamental to my recovery. So I also trained as an embodiment coach with Embodiment Unlimited, and I did their meditation teacher training as well. So I got tools now to deal with the practical coaching, like helping people just rebuild their lives on a practical level. And then also to help with stress management, self-awareness, recognizing the truth, all of that more body, mind stuff that comes into it as well. And it feels like it's a beautiful combination. I worked with a business coach to put together a model. And then I've created the peace model, which I think is wonderful, because what else are we looking for but peace? What we're really looking for in ourselves is peace and in sobriety. And so then I put together the peace model, which is around purpose. So I start in early recovery with, why do you want to do this? You've got to make it matter to you. And then in later recoveries, things like what you do and things like finding your purpose now that you're in this better place. And then we look at energy and awareness and connection and emotions and build up skills and build up tools to help people to build a beautiful life of peace in recovery.
Lovely.
And it's
lovely.
Very exciting stuff.
And what's your website called for people that would like to get in touch?
So it's 𝐬𝐿𝐻𝐿�recovery.com. And it's called Red Shoes Recovery because of the whole powerlessness thing, and from the line from The Wizard of Oz where Glinda says you had the power all along.
Clever. Esther, if someone's listening to this and they're thinking, it's all right for those two, they're 9 years sober, but I'm deep in my drinking and I've got no idea how to get out of this, what would you say to them? That first step, because as we talked about, it's so difficult. What do you think people should do?
The first thing I would say is I never thought that sobriety, that recovery was even remotely possible for me. The year previously to my giving up, I tried doing sober October, and I lasted 3 days. And then I drank every day for the rest of the month. I was convinced I was trapped. I was certain that was my life and that I was never going to escape from it. So the first thing I would say is to just let go of that idea that it's not possible, that if you've tried other things and they haven't worked, that doesn't mean that you are never going to be able to do it. There is a way that you can find that's going to work for you. Just give yourself that grace and allow yourself to explore something else, because you will find it.